America was in shock. It was November 22nd, 1963, a day that started like any other but ended in tragedy. President John F. Kennedy, a young and charismatic leader, had been assassinated in Dallas, Texas. The news spread like wildfire, and a wave of grief washed over the entire country. People were glued to their televisions and radios, trying to make sense of the senseless. It felt like the nation had lost a family member. Kennedy represented hope and a bright future, a new Camelot. His sudden death left a giant hole in the heart of America, and people were desperate for a way to honor his memory and legacy. You see, in times of great national sorrow, people look for symbols. They need something tangible to hold on to, something that represents what was lost and what is still cherished. Calls began pouring into the U.S. Mint and the Treasury Department almost immediately. Citizens from all walks of life, from school children to war veterans, were writing letters and making phone calls. They all had the same idea, the same powerful suggestion: put President Kennedy on a coin. It was a spontaneous, grassroots movement born from collective grief. People wanted a permanent, circulating memorial that every American could see and touch every single day. The idea wasn't just popular, it was overwhelming. Normally, changing a coin's design is a long, drawn-out process. There are laws in place. For instance, a coin design usually has to be in use for 25 years before it can be changed. The Franklin half dollar, which was the current 50-cent piece, had only been around since 1948. It was nowhere near its 25-year mark, but the emotional tide was too strong to ignore. The feeling in Washington and across the country was that this was a special circumstance. The rules had to be bent, or even broken, to give the American people the tribute they so clearly craved. So, the powers that be started to listen. Mint Director Eva Adams was one of the first key figures to recognize the depth of this public demand. She saw that this was more than just a fleeting emotional response. It was a deep-seated need for the nation to heal. She began discussions with Treasury Secretary C. Douglas Dillon. The idea of replacing the Franklin half dollar with a coin honoring Kennedy quickly gained traction. It was the perfect denomination. It was large enough to feature a detailed and dignified portrait, and it was a coin that was still used in daily commerce. The stage was set for one of the fastest coin redesigns in history. The thing about government work is that it's usually slow, but not this time. The push to create the Kennedy half dollar moved at lightning speed. Just days after the assassination, Mint Director Eva Adams was on the phone with the Mint's chief engraver, Gilroy Roberts. The conversation was simple and direct. They needed to prepare a design for a Kennedy coin, and they needed it yesterday. The project was given the highest priority. Everyone from the Treasury Department up to President Lyndon B. Johnson, Joey D. John Joer Dawan, Haman Dairy Johns and Dees D. Dawan, who had just taken office, was on board. This wasn't just a new coin, it was a national priority, a way to help a grieving country move forward. Now, here's where Jacqueline Kennedy, the president's widow, comes into the story. Her input was considered absolutely essential. Out of respect, no design would move forward without her approval. She was consulted on which coin should bear her late husband's image. Initially, the quarter dollar was considered, which would have replaced the portrait of George Washington. Mrs. Kennedy, however, felt strongly that Washington should not be removed from the quarter. She suggested the half dollar instead. She felt that replacing Benjamin Franklin, while still significant, was a more appropriate change. Her graceful decision shaped the project's direction and is a key part of the coin's history. With Mrs. Kennedy's blessing for the half dollar, the project went into overdrive. Congress needed to act to make it legal, since the Franklin half dollar hadn't reached its 25-year milestone. A bill was introduced in Congress on December 10, 1963, to authorize the new coin. The support was immediate and bipartisan. Politicians who argued about everything else were united on this. The bill sailed through the House and the Senate with incredible speed. President Johnson signed it into law on December 30th, 1963. Think about that. In just over a month, they went from a tragic event to a new law authorizing a memorial coin. That's virtually unheard of. The pressure was now squarely on the U.S. Mint. With the law passed, they had a very tight deadline. The goal was to get the new half dollars into circulation by early 1964. This meant the entire process, finalizing the design, creating the master dies, and preparing for mass production, had to be completed in a matter of weeks. The team at the Mint worked through the holidays, putting in long hours. They knew the eyes of the nation were on them. They weren't just making a piece of metal, they were crafting a symbol of remembrance that would be held in the hands of millions of Americans. It was a heavy responsibility, and they took it very seriously. So, you have the green light, you have the law, but you need a design. Where do you start? Luckily, the Mint had a head start. The U.S. Mint had already designed a presidential medal for Kennedy as part of its regular series. The portrait, or obverse, for that medal had been sculpted by the Mint's chief engraver, Gilroy Roberts. He had met with President Kennedy in 1961 to sketch him, so he had a real feel for his subject. For the reverse, or tail side, the Mint turned to another talented artist, assistant engraver, Frank Gasparo. He had designed the reverse of the Kennedy Presidential Medal, which featured the seal of the President of the United States. Gilroy Roberts took his existing bust of Kennedy from the medal and began modifying it for the coin. He wanted to capture the president's character and dignity. After the assassination, he felt the portrait needed to be stronger, more heroic. He refined the lines of the hair and sharpened the profile to create a more memorable image. He worked tirelessly, knowing how important this portrait would be. Interestingly, after he submitted his initial design, he received a call from Jacqueline Kennedy. She had a small suggestion. She felt the part in the hair was a little too pronounced and asked if he could soften it. Roberts, of course, was happy to make the change for her. On the other side of the coin, Frank Gasparo was busy adapting his design. The presidential seal is very detailed, with media group, detailed close-up of the presidential seal on coin, engraver working on eagle and stars design, Frank Gasparo at workbench with coin reverse sketches, Stocka, a distribute. Equally, a heraldic eagle clutching an olive branch and arrows, surrounded by a ring of 50 stars. Shrinking that down to the size of a $50 without losing its clarity is a real challenge. Gasparo had to rework the entire design to make it strike properly on a coin. He made the eagle more powerful and refined the details of media group, macro shot of Kennedy, $50 reverse showing eagle and shield, engraver, refining coin, die under magnifier, before and after of presidential seal design changes for coin Istaka distribute equally the shield, the olive branch, and the arrows. He also added his initials, FG, to the reverse, just under the eagle's right leg, a little detail that many collectors look for today. Once the designs were finalized and approved by Mrs. Kennedy and Treasury Secretary Dillon, the work was still not done. The artist's plaster models had to be converted into master hubs and dies. This is the tooling that is used to actually strike the coins. It's a very precise and technical process. Any mistake here would be magnified millions of times over in the final coins. The engraving department at the Philadelphia Mint was working around the clock. They successfully created the first master dies in January 1964, a remarkable achievement given the incredibly short timeline. The designs by Roberts and Gasparo were now ready to become history. With the dies ready, it was time to make some coins. The first Kennedy $50 were struck in early 1964. The Denver Mint produced the very first circulation strikes on January 30th, followed shortly by the Philadelphia Mint. At the same time, the San Francisco Mint, which was an assay office at the time, began producing special proof versions for collectors. These proof coins are struck on polished planchets with specially prepared dies to give them a mirror-like finish. The sense of urgency was felt at every level of the Mint. Everyone knew they were part of a historic moment. The composition of these first coins is really important. The year 1964 was the last time that a circulating U.S. silver coin was made of 90% silver. That's the same silver content that dimes, quarters, and $50 had used for generations. This high silver content gave the coins a distinct look, feel, and even a unique sound when dropped. The plan was to mint about 90 million of these 1964 $50. That seemed like a huge number at the time, more than enough to meet public demand. But as we'll see, nobody could have predicted what was about to happen. The very first coins struck were ceremonial. Dignitaries like Treasury Secretary Dillon and members of the Kennedy family received some of the earliest examples. A special ceremony was held on February 11, 1964, where Mint Director Eva Adams presented the first coins. The production lines then went into full swing. The presses at Philadelphia and Denver were stamping out thousands of these new half-dollars every hour. The mint was trying its best to build up a substantial inventory before releasing the coins to the public. They knew the demand would be high, but they were about to find out just how high. As the mint ramped up production, they realized their initial estimate of 90 million coins was way too low. The public excitement was building to a fever pitch. Stories were running in newspapers and on television about the new coin. The mint received permission from Congress to continue minting the 1964 dated coins well into 1965 to meet the staggering demand. In the end, they produced over 430 million 1964 Kennedy half-dollars. That's more than all the Franklin half-dollars minted during its entire 16-year run. The stage was set for one of the most chaotic coin releases in American history. The official release date for the Kennedy half-dollar was March 24, 1964, and on that day, all heck broke loose. The Treasury Department made the coins available to banks across the country, and the public response was immediate and overwhelming. Long lines formed outside banks hours before they even opened. People took time off work, and some even camped out overnight. It was kinda like a Black Friday sale, but for a 50-cent coin. Everyone wanted one. Not just to spend, but to keep. It was a pocket-sized memorial to their fallen president, a piece of history they could actually hold in their hand. You see, the Treasury completely underestimated the emotional connection people had to Kennedy. They thought people would get a few coins and put them into circulation. They were wrong. On the first day in Washington, D.C., the Treasury Building's cashier window sold out of its entire inventory of 70,000 coins in just a few hours, and had to start rationing them. The same story played out everywhere. A bank in Philadelphia was limiting people to just 2 coins each. A bank in New York was swarmed by a crowd of 5,000 people. The demand was absolutely insatiable. These coins were not being spent, they were being hoarded. This created a massive coin shortage. The half-dollar, which was meant to be a workhorse of commerce, just vanished from circulation. As soon as banks got a shipment, the coins were snapped up by collectors, hoarders, and everyday citizens who just wanted a memento. The problem was made worse by 2 factors. First, the coin was beautiful. The high-quality silver and the powerful portrait made it something folks wanted to save. Second, silver prices were starting to rise, so speculators were also grabbing the coins, betting that their melt value would soon be worth more than their face value. The mint kept producing the 1964 dated coins at a frantic pace, but it was like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in it. The coins went from the mint to the banks, and straight into people's sock drawers and safety deposit boxes. You almost never saw one in your change. The great American coin hunt was on, but the prize was nearly impossible to find in the wild. This hoarding created a major problem for the Treasury, and, for businesses that relied on half-dollars for making change. It was clear that something had to be done, and it would lead to a major change in the coin itself. The hoarding of the 1964 Kennedy half-dollar, combined with the rising price of silver, created a perfect storm. The United States government realized it could no longer afford to make coins out of 90% silver. The metal in the coins was becoming worth more than their face value. This led to the Coinage Act of 1965, a landmark piece of legislation that changed American money forever. The act removed silver entirely from the dime and the quarter, replacing it with the copper-nickel clad composition we know today. But the half-dollar was treated differently, as a sort of compromise. From 1965 to 1970, the Kennedy half-dollar was made with a reduced silver content. Instead of being 90% silver, it was now a silver-clad coin, consisting of an outer layer of 80% silver and 20% copper, bonded to an inner core of mostly copper. This brought the total silver content down to 40%. The idea was to keep some silver in the coin to honor Kennedy, while also discouraging the widespread hoarding that was crippling the nation's coin supply. Did it work? Not really. People continued to pull these 40% silver halves from circulation, believing they too would be valuable one day. By 1971, the government finally gave up. The Treasury decided that keeping any silver in the half-dollar was unsustainable. So starting in 1971, the Kennedy half-dollar's composition was changed again, this time to match the dime and quarter. It was now a copper-nickel-clad coin with no silver at all. This marked the end of silver in circulating United States coinage. The half-dollar had lost its precious metal content, and as a result, it also started to lose its place in daily commerce. With vending machines and parking meters no longer designed for them, half-dollars became less and less common in people's pockets. One of the most interesting changes happened in the mid-1970s. For the nation's bicentennial celebration in 1976, the United States Mint held a competition for new reverse designs for the quarter, half-dollar, and dollar coin. A young artist named Seth G. Huntington won the competition for the half-dollar. His design featured Philadelphia's Independence Hall, the birthplace of the United States. All half-dollars minted for the bicentennial bore the dual date, 1776 to 1976 on the front, and Huntington's Independence Hall design on the back. In 1977, the coin reverted to Frank Gasparo's original presidential seal reverse, but the bicentennial issue remains a popular and unique part of the series. After the silver was removed in 1971 and the bicentennial excitement faded, the Kennedy half-dollar entered a strange new phase. It was still being minted by the hundreds of millions each year, but you just didn't see it in circulation very often. Banks would have them if you asked, but businesses had largely stopped using them. The coin became something of a stranger in its own land. It was too big for most vending machines and too cumbersome for cash registers. It had become a coin non grata, a coin that was technically legal tender but practically obsolete in daily life. This is where collectors really stepped in to keep the coin's story alive. Since the coin wasn't being used, the ones that were minted often stayed in brilliant, uncirculated condition inside bankrolls and bags. For coin collectors, this was fantastic. It meant you could assemble a beautiful collection of modern Kennedy half-dollars for not much more than their face value. People started collecting them by date and mint mark, the little P for Philadelphia, D for Denver, or S for San Francisco. The hunt for high-grade examples, free of nicks and scratches, became a popular hobby. In 2002, the United States Mint made a major decision. Since the coins weren't circulating anyway, they announced they would stop striking Kennedy half-dollars for general circulation. From that point on, the coins would only be produced in smaller quantities and sold directly to collectors in bags and rolls at a premium over face value. This transformed the Kennedy half from a failed circulation coin into a successful collector's coin. This decision, known as producing coins not intended for circulation or NIFC, instantly made every Kennedy half-dollar from 2002 onward a collectible item, as you couldn't get them from your local bank anymore. Today, collecting Kennedy half-dollars is more popular than ever. There are many ways to do it. Some people focus on just the 90% and 40% silver issues. Others try to get one from every year and mint mark. Advanced collectors hunt for rare varieties and error coins like the accented hairproof from 1964 or the 1974 D double-die obverse. The series is long and diverse, offering something for every budget. It's a great entry point for new collectors because many of the coins are affordable, but it also has enough rare and interesting pieces to keep a seasoned numismatist busy for a lifetime. Every old coin has a few secrets, and the Kennedy half is no exception. One of the most famous stories involves the 1964 accented hairproof. When Gilroy Roberts was designing the obverse, the first version he submitted had very strong, deep lines in Kennedy's hair just above the ear. This is the version that Jacqueline Kennedy saw and asked to be softened. A small number of proof coins, maybe around 100,000, were struck with this original accented hair dye before it was replaced. These coins are highly sought after by collectors today because they represent the artist's first vision for the portrait. Here's another one you probably don't know. What happened to Frank Gasparo's initials? As I mentioned, his FG is on the reverse, under the eagle's leg. Well, in 1982, a mint worker cleaning a die accidentally polished them right off. Nobody noticed until a bunch of 1982 P half-dollars with no FG on the reverse were released into circulation. This created the no FG variety, a famous error coin that collectors love to hunt for. It's a great example of how a small mistake at the mint can create a rare and valuable collectible. It's these little stories that make coin collecting so much fun. The mint has also released some very special Kennedy half-dollars over the years. In 1998, they released a special collector's set that included a Kennedy half-dollar with a matte, non-reflective finish, which is very unusual. But the biggest celebration came in 2014 for the coin's 50th anniversary. To mark the occasion, the Mint went all out. They issued a whole series of special Kennedy half-dollars. This included clad coins, silver coins, and for the first time ever, a Kennedy half-dollar struck in 3/4 of an ounce of pure 24-karat gold. They even used Gilroy Roberts' original 1964 portrait sculpt for these anniversary coins. The release of the 2014 gold Kennedy half-dollar caused a frenzy that rivaled the original release in 1964. The American Numismatic Association's World's Fair of Money in Chicago was mobbed by people wanting to buy one. The lines were so long that the Mint had to stop sales for safety reasons. It proved that 50 years later, the connection between the American people, President Kennedy, and this iconic coin was as strong as ever. These special editions aren't just pieces of metal. They are milestones in the ongoing story of a coin that was born from tragedy, but became a symbol of an enduring legacy. When you look at the Kennedy half-dollar today, you're looking at more than just 50 cents. You're looking at a piece of American history that has evolved with the country itself. It began as a nation's spontaneous tribute to a beloved president. It was designed in a hurry, born from grief, and embraced with a passion that no one could have foreseen. The coin's journey mirrors our own. It went from being a precious silver treasure to a common clad coin, and from a staple of commerce to a collector's item. Its story is a fascinating reflection of the last half-century of American life. The legacy of the coin is multifaceted. For an older generation, it's a direct link to the 1960s, a tangible reminder of President Kennedy and the Camelot era. Holding a 1964 silver half-dollar can transport them back in time. For coin collectors, it's a rich and accessible series with dozens of dates, mint marks, and varieties to discover. It's a gateway into the hobby for many young people, and even for the general public, who rarely see one anymore, the Kennedy half-dollar still holds a special place. It's a coin that everyone recognizes and respects, even if they don't use it. The decision to continue minting the coin each year, even just for collectors, ensures that its legacy will not be forgotten. Each new Kennedy half-dollar produced at the Mint adds another chapter to the story. It keeps the image of John F. Kennedy in the public consciousness, fulfilling the original intent of those who called for its creation back in 1963. It serves as a constant metallic reminder of his call to service. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. That's a powerful message to carry around in your pocket. So, the next time you come across a Kennedy half-dollar, whether it's a shiny new one from the Mint or a worn silver one from 1964, take a moment to think about its incredible journey. From a symbol of mourning to a collector's prize, it has been on a wild ride. It's a story of art, history, politics, and public emotion, all captured on a small, round piece of metal, and that's what makes it one of the most fascinating coins ever produced by the United States. It's not just money, it's a piece of the American soul. And you never know what's going to come through that door.